that's really important, just to make sure that we're all on the same page. Ladies and gentlemen, we are going to win this election. Because we are doing this with each other, by one another, and for every single person in Texas. We don't care about the differences between us. We will not be divided. We will not be kept from the big things that we know that we can do, that we know that we must do in order to meet this moment. And it's the perfect contrast to the person who's in the highest office in the land today. Someone who wants to make you afraid of your neighbor, who's trying to tell you who you're supposed to hate or be scared of next. In Great Rapids, Texas, it's you or me. In our Texas, it's going to be you and me. It's going to be every single one of us. We're for everybody. We're for that extraordinary Vietnam veteran that I met as I came in. He was wearing that cap with pride and distinction, who was sent off to fight a war 50 years ago that this country didn't understand, and came back to Galveston not to ticker tape parades or to pats on the back or to thank you for your service, at best to the indifference of the people who he fought for in the first place, at worst the outright hatred of a country that was never explained the reason we were in that war to begin with. And yet nonetheless, he got after it when he moved back to Galveston, put his head down, raised his family, built up his business, and most important to me at least, he's been front in line serving every generation of veteran that's followed him, including those who've come back recently from Iraq and Afghanistan. And as you all know, because it's in the news right now, as it should be, these service members, when they were over there, were forced to breathe in God only knows what from these toxic burn pits that were burning medical waste and computer equipment and toxins and chemicals, and we really don't all the way know. And now these veterans are back here in Galveston and in Texas in our country, and they're having a hard time breathing. And that Vietnam-era veteran says, you know what, buddy? When I came back, it took this country 40 years to recognize my exposure to Agent Orange as the presumptive condition for the cancers that those who I went over to that war with were dying from the diseases and conditions that make life so damn hard for us. 40 years for this country to step up and do the right thing. And that Vietnam-era veteran says to the man or woman returning from Iraq and Afghanistan, I will not allow it to be 40 years until this country does the right thing for you. So I want to tell you this. If you've been following the news, even though we sent every single one of those women, every single one of those men over there, and they willingly did that, fewer than 1% of our fellow Americans have enlisted since 9/11. Every war that we fought in those two countries, but also in Yemen, in Iraq, in Somalia, all the places we send them to take the lives of others, but also to be willing to sacrifice their lives for us. We spared no expense to train them, to equip them, to send them, and now that they're back, our representatives in Congress cannot figure out how to pass a bill that had overwhelming bipartisan support. Now, there's some news that it might get passed tonight, but whether or not it does, let us make sure that we stand up for that veteran who served us by standing up a toxic burn pit registry right here in the state of Texas. Everyone who has served in these conflicts, welcome to sign up on that. We connect them in Texas with the care that they've earned, that they deserve. We do it at our expense. We do it at the VA if we can get them in. If we can't, it's the county hospital, it's private providers, it's wherever we can connect them with the care that literally will save their lives. For that veteran who comes back, I want to make sure that she also doesn't have to worry about a roof over her head. Tonight, as you're going to bed in that safe, comfortable home that you live in, think about those veterans in Texas who number in the hundreds, who'll be sleeping on the streets, under bridges, in the parks that we play in during the day. This state does not lack for resources or wealth, We're the 9th largest economy on the planet. We only fail in the political will to do the right thing. With your help, we're going to make sure that no veteran goes without housing or resources or connection to care. We're going to make sure that every one of them gets the respect and is treated with the dignity that they deserve. And when they come to us, they say, hey, Beto, I could get into the VA, but they were all too willing to prescribe an opioid to me, to which I may become addicted, and from which I may die. And the VA, as only the VA can, when they realize they have a problem, they'll cut that veteran off cold turkey and just hope that they get by, come back and see us in 9 months. I want to make sure when that veteran says, my post-traumatic stress disorder, my traumatic brain injury, those signature conditions and wounds that I return to this country with can only be helped when I do something that is illegal in this state right now, and that is to purchase cannabis to relieve the symptoms that I feel. I want to make sure that that veteran hears us loud and clear. We're going to legalize marijuana in the state of Texas. No one's serving time for a substance that is legal in most of the rest of the country. And given the fact that all Texans, regardless of our differences, your race, your ethnicity, your gender, all use marijuana at roughly the same rate. But only some Texans, based on the color of their skin, are likely to be stopped and frisked and incarcerated, and upon release, to have to check a box on every employment application form. We are also going to expunge the arrest records of everyone who served time for marijuana in the state of Texas. We're going to do the right thing. I don't want that veteran to come home to a state where she is no longer able to make her own decisions about her own body. You know that we now live in a place that has outlawed access to abortion beginning at conception, with no exception for rape, no exception for incest. We lead the developed world in the rate of maternal mortality 3 times as deadly for black women in the state of Texas. Because as we made it almost impossible to get an abortion, we've also made it almost impossible in some communities to get a cervical cancer screening, to see a family planning provider, to see a doctor of any kind. That's why when we win, we're going to make sure every woman makes her own decisions about her own body, her own health care, right here in the state of Texas. And as you all know, lest anyone tell you that this is impossible, and they'll try to scare you. They'll say, Texas is too red, it is too reactionary. This is the hothouse where these extreme ideas originate in the first place. You'll never get it done. Will you tell them this, that you know your history? And in 1972, just like in the year 2022, abortion was completely illegal in the state of Texas. But no one rode to our rescue. No one came in and saved the day for the women of Texas. In fact, it was the women of Texas, Jane Roe of Roe versus Wade, her 2 attorneys, both Texas women, Linda Coffey, who lives in Dallas, Sarah Weddington from that liberal bastion of Abilene. They argued that case before an all-male Supreme Court half a century ago and won the constitutional right of privacy to make your own personal decisions on your own. I'm here to tell you, it was Texas women back then, it will be Texas women today who saved the day. That's how we're going to do it. I don't want that veteran who has served this country, willing to put their life on the line, to worry that their child walks into a classroom this or the next week, whenever school starts in your district. In my hometown of El Paso, school started yesterday. We got a sophomore, we have a freshman, and we have a 6th grader. And they are no safer today, more than 9 weeks after that shooting in Uvalde, than they were on the last day of school in the last school year. Those of you who have served, especially going as far back as Vietnam, know that the AR-15 was originally designed for use in combat. It's supposed to penetrate an enemy helmet at 500 feet and kill that soldier dead. You also know, if you heard the testimony of the physicians who saw those children after they were slaughtered in those classrooms. The only way they could identify their fucking bodies was by the shoes that they were wearing, by the DNA in their system. That we still allow these weapons of war, with those high impact, high velocity rounds, to be used against kids in their schools, people at the Walmart in El Paso, Sutherland Springs, Midland, Odessa, 5 of the worst mass shootings in U.S. history, right here in this state in the last 5 years. And your government, my government, our government, has only made it easier for violent criminals to carry these weapons and to do us harm. Ladies and gentlemen, we have to come together and make sure that we put the lives of our kids ahead of the profit of the gun, ahead of the political interest of the NRA, and do the right thing at the right time for the people who are counting on us. We may come to different conclusions on this issue, but I don't think anyone needs an AR-15 or an AK-47 unless they're on a battlefield. I think at minimum, we should raise the age of purchase from 18 to 21. Universal background checks, red flag laws. These are common sense steps. And look, if you're like me, what you fear more than anything else is the judgment of your kids. These little people have no vote in this next election. They have no voice that anybody in power is ever going to be willing to listen to unless we change those who are in power. There's no lobbying for them. There's no political action committee. There's no billionaire donor who's going to say, pay attention to these kids right now. It is us. It is you. It is me. And at some point, we will all have to answer for what we did or what we failed to do at this defining moment of truth. Those kids are counting on us. My kids are counting on us. Your kids are counting on us right now. Listen, I know what you've been told by the other politicians and the pundits and the prognosticators and the press and the pollsters, that this is a very red state. It's been 32 years since a Democrat last won this office. Happened to have been one of the best people who ever served in that office, Ann Richards. Maybe you remember her. That the gun lobby is too powerful. The rules of our elections have been rigged such that it's harder and harder for people to vote, and not for everybody to vote. When more than 700 polling locations have been closed down in the state of Texas, twice the number of the next closest state, even though we are the fastest growing state. And the majority of those closures have happened in the fastest growing black and brown neighborhoods. When you can use your license to carry permit to prove who you are at the polling place, but you don't dare use your student ID to do the same. When we have a racial gerrymander of the state that has drawn people out of districts solely based on the color of their skin or their country of national origin, you can be forgiven for being tempted to despair. But don't go there. And remember that action is the antidote to despair. It is the key to victory. It is necessary for what we want to do for those kids who are counting on us right now. There are people in the room in yellow vests, and I'm looking for them. I see Angela back here. Angela, who else do you have? I see one back here. I see another right here. I see a fourth one back here. Every single one of them has a clipboard. And on that clipboard, you can add your name and your contact information. And I'll warn you, you put it down, we're going to call you. And we're going to ask you. We're going to ask you to get out there in this Texas sun and knock on doors and meet people where they are. You'll be soaked to your shoes in sweat by the end of that day. But I'll tell you, we can come up with the most brilliant television ads humankind has ever known. But you may not watch TV, or you may have developed an immunity to political advertising. You may or may not read the mailer we send to your house. It might collect dust on your kitchen table. You may or may not follow us on social media. But another human being shows up at your door, eyeball to eyeball, face to face, human to human, in this incredibly divided age, when we are so consumed by digital devices and only listening to people that we know and feel safe around and who come to the same conclusions that we do. When you break through that literally by your presence in person, it is profound. It is transformational. There are 80,000 people who have signed up for shifts to volunteer for this campaign. That voter suppression that I talked about that has made it so hard for people to vote, you all saw 13% of the mail-in ballots were rejected in March in our primary election. If that happened in Venezuela, we'd say, you know what, that checks out. Probably not a real democracy. That is happening right now in the state of Texas. So think about those 7 million who were eligible to cast a ballot in 2020, but did not. They're not lazy. There is no lack of love for this democracy. It is that we have drawn them out of their ability to participate. You sign up with one of these yellow vests on the clipboard that they are carrying, I will send you to their doors. And the very people who were attacked, the very people who were intended not to participate, the very focus of the suppression and intimidation, they will be the ones who provide the margin of victory on the night of November 8th. You all with me? We do that. There is no stopping us. Not only can we keep these kids safe in that classroom, we're also going to pay their teachers enough not to work a second or a third job. We're actually going to listen to those teachers and do what they tell us will allow them to connect better with those kids, like canceling the STAR test so they can go out there and outcome learning. We're going to give those retired teachers a cost of living adjustment every single year. We'll have one maintained. We're going to make sure that this is the best state for public education by getting behind the people who actually provide it. We're losing school teachers and counselors and librarians and bus drivers and cafeteria workers and support personnel by the thousands in this state right now. On average, in Galveston, if you teach, you're underpaid by $9,500 a year against the national average. Other places are making $7,000. In Bowie, north of where we are, it is $16,500 a year. No wonder we can't keep them on the rolls. And then when we tell them, listen, you can teach this version of history, but don't you dare teach that version of history. Or, I want you, Mr. or Ms. Teacher, to turn in the parents of that kid because he's transgender and turn them over to CPS for child abuse investigation. And that child and every kid in your household will be taken from you if that investigation is proven and that accusation is sustained in a program that has lost the lives of 100 kids since the year 2020, where tonight in some CPS offices, those foster kids will be sleeping in the offices, in the hallway, under the desks, on top of the tables. That's where he wants to send the children of these loving parents who are doing their best to make sure their kids can literally make it through at this moment. It's no longer going to be you or me. It's going to be you and me. But we all have to do our part. We got to make sure that whether it's that veteran I talked about, or that kid in that classroom, or that teacher is connecting with him and drawing forth a lifelong love of learning. Once we stoke that curiosity, there is no stopping that kid. There's no stopping the rest of us. We got to make sure that if you are struggling right now, because prices are going through the roof. Under Greg Abbott, property taxes up $20 billion. The genius in the governor's office who could not keep the lights on in the energy capital of the world has sent your utility bill of $45 a month. If amidst all that, you can't afford afford insurance in a state that has refused to expand Medicaid, and you have diabetes that's untreated, flu that you can't go see the doctor for, a curable cancer where you can actually survive but you will die because you cannot get in right now, in a state that boasts a $2 trillion economy. I'm here to tell you, when we win this election, we're going to take yes for an answer. We're going to expand Medicaid. We're going to bring those $10 billion in. We're going to connect more people with care, hire more providers, go from 51st in the nation in mental health care access to first in the nation in mental health care access. If we have anything to do about it, we're going to teach those kids with significant disabilities who are medically complex, who are on a wait list right now of 18 years, ladies and gentlemen, for state-supported services. 18 years to be able to get in and get some help. I mean, think about all the opportunity that we have right now. And it's on you. And it's on me. No one else, right? There's something scary about that we're on our own. And there's something incredibly powerful about that we're on our own. It's you and I together. And listen, whatever brought you out here today, whether it is that need to make sure everyone can see a doctor, or every kid is safe in that classroom, or every teacher is treated with that respect that we're talking about, or that we save our democracy at its moment of maximum peril. Think about this. Few generations have been as fortunate as ours to have the chance to fight for everything, literally, that matters to this state, that matters to this country, that matters to our lives. When LBJ, the first Texas president, convened both houses of Congress in March of 1965, a week removed from Bloody Sunday, when a 24-year-old John Lewis attempted to cross the Edmund Pettus Bridge for the right to vote, he pointed at John Lewis and those civil rights and voting rights marchers, and he said something to the effect of, as it was in Concord during the Revolutionary War, as it was in Appomattox at the end of the Civil War, so it is today. Men and women literally willing to put their lives on the line and lose them for this democracy. Well, as it was in those periods, so it is at this very moment. This is it. I don't know, if I'm honest with you, that there is an election in 2024 or 2026. I don't know there's an American democracy 246 years in this experiment that our kids will get to inherit. You and I are the heirs of the struggle and the sacrifice and the service of every veteran and every veteran of the civil rights and voting rights effort. What we do with this inheritance will define our future and determine who we are in the eyes of our kids forever. We cannot be found wanting. We must win, and we must do this together. Are you ready to win this election? Are you ready to win it for Texas? Are you ready to do it together? We must win. Thank you, Galveston, for coming out. And everyone else go. Thank you so much. Cynthia Gallo. We're going to take some questions. As we try to do in every community that we go to, we want to listen to the people that we want to serve. My best hope of being able to hit the ground running for Galveston is to first understand what's most important to you here in Galveston. So even though I'm no stranger to this community, we visited again and again and again, we can never learn enough. I want to be the best possible governor for you. So Cynthia Conley, who's right here with this black cap, if you raise your hand, she'll bring this second mic over to you, and we'll take your voice, your question. We'll bring you into this conversation. Ms. Conley.
Yes, and please keep it to one question so we can get to as many of these hands up as we can.
Hi, I have a question for some Republican folks I need to sway. Although their primary concern is you not taking their guns away, which of course I disagree with the value of that over the children's lives, but they know and say guns will still get into schools even if we change common sense gun laws, etc. What else are you going to do to help protect our school children, perhaps increase security budgets for schools, etc.? They want to know what else you're going to do for that.
Great. So good question here. I would begin, I keep talking about showing respect, and listening to the educators in the classroom, those educators, those students, their parents, they're going to understand their schools better than I ever will. You come up with the solutions that serve the population that you're in front of, I will partner with you, and we'll get it done. And I don't even know what that's going to be in your school. Is it, someone mentioned making sure that the doors are locked? Is it more perimeter fencing? Is it some other innovation that you've come up with? Well, you know best. I get behind you. You know, the governor, the day after the Uvalde massacre, said this is a mental health problem, right? Which is interesting for him to say, because not only are we 51st in the nation in mental health care access on his watch, the month before Uvalde, he took $211 million out of the state of Texas's mental health care budget. But for anyone who thinks there's a connection, by all means, let's fully fund mental health care in the state of Texas. So those are two things. But I cannot leave the third out, because we could be number one in mental health care access. We could harden the heck out of these schools. But if we do not address the fact that an 18-year-old could buy not one, but two AR-15s and hundreds of rounds of ammunition and walk into that classroom and kill those kids, then we will have failed the parents of those children who are demanding action from us at this moment, and our own kids who are watching to see what we do. So, to the question asked by your Republican friends, and I'm rephrasing what she just said, you know what, Beto, pass any law you want, criminals are going to ignore it. That shooter in Uvalde patiently waited until his 18th birthday, because the law in Texas right now is you have to be 18. He didn't try to get the gun when he was 16, didn't try to get it when he was 17. Imagine if we raised the age at least to 21. We bought 3 more years for some intervention, for some stroke of luck, for something on our part maybe to make it less likely that he's going to want to do that in the first place. A red flag law, that's where if you already have the firearm in the household, but you are threatening to use it against yourself or against someone in your life, we can intervene before it's too late. The shooter in Uvalde was sending signals in every direction so bad that his friends called him the school shooter before he ever walked into that school and shot anybody. But right now in Texas, how do you intervene if you don't have a red flag law? And I've listened to my Republican brothers and sisters, gun owners and non-gun owners alike. Most of them can get behind raising the age, a universal background check, and a red flag law. Let's start there and save some lives. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Okay, we're behind you, Beto, directly underneath the door, right here.
Got you, yeah.
Okay, and before we do our next question, just want to recognize some folks that are here. Ms. Janet Duddy, she's a candidate running for comptroller. Janet.
All right, our next comptroller here.
We have Pastor Williams King. He's the candidate for the county judge.
All right, Pastor King, I see you right here. Thank you for coming.
Michael Williams, running for Texas District 14.
All right, Michael, there you go.
Okay, and I will update as we get more.
Hey!
Hi there.
I don't have a question, but I just want to tell you I love you, and I'm listening to you long time. And I'm not going to say, but you're my boy, okay? I love you! That's all I'm saying. Thank you!
That's awesome.
She just wanted to give you some
I love you.
Some love for Beto.
Hey, Beto. My husband and I were supporting you even when we were living in Chicago before we moved back to my home state and my hometown in Galveston. I'm one of your phone bankers. Now, my father grew up here. He's the 3rd generation of my family to be on this island. He raised me pro-choice because he remembered a day where there were multiple women found alone in their homes in puddles, I need to say this in front of a crowd, in puddles of their own blood because they had to take matters into their own hands. We are now in a situation where women in this state are in that same scenario. Until we can get these rights back where they should be, what are you going to do to ensure safe passage to women to attain the reproductive health care that they were guaranteed 50 years ago?
Great question. Listen, we have to use every lever of power at our disposal to return power to the people who should have it in the first place, the women of Texas. And so the bad ideas that you hear right now, on top of the very bad idea that Greg Abbott already signed into law. Total abortion ban, no exception for rape or incest. And a reminder on that rape part, when a reporter reminded him that the bill he was signing into law made no exception for rape, Greg Abbott's response was that he was going to eliminate rape in the state of Texas. And not only has he not done that, more rapes have been committed in the state of Texas, unfortunately, than any other state. The ability to bring a rapist to justice in Greg Abbott's Texas has declined by half. There are more people out on the streets who have raped one of our fellow Texans who have yet to serve time or be held accountable. And at DPS headquarters, there are thousands of untested rape kits right now on the shelves. Why do I say all this? Because Greg Abbott may tell you this is about a heartbeat. They call this the heartbeat law. He may tell you it is about life. But if he really cared about life, when we have lost 100 kids in CPS care last year, we lead the world in the rate of maternal mortality, as I mentioned earlier, 3 times as deadly for black women here in the state. No, it is about power, it is about control, and it is about an attack on Texas women right now. So these new ideas coming down the pike, we're going to check your travel papers if you want to leave Texas and you're of childbearing age. If you're an employer and you want to fund the travel to some other state for one of your employees to make your own personal, private, and very often painful healthcare decision, we will come after you. And that's not me making it up. That's the Texas Freedom Caucus, Republicans who already have that on their letterhead, mailed out to one of the big employers in North Texas already. So not only can we veto those things, we're going to make sure that executive action to the ability it can support every woman doing whatever she wants when it comes to her body, we are there, and that we find as much common ground with members of the legislature to enact this into law and to make sure that it lasts long after our term in office. Just imagine if for the first time in 32 years, a proudly pro-choice candidate wins this office. The shockwaves through this state, frankly, through this country, what it all of a sudden makes possible, and the fact that even those Republican legislators who care nothing more than to get reelected understand that their prospects are conditional on getting with the program, we're going to have a whole new ballgame, seats at the table. Thank you for being here.
I'd also like to recognize Stephen Holmes, who's running for county commissioner.
All right, Stephen Holmes.
Okay, here we go.
Yes, so Greg Abbott has done a lot of things to attack the transgender youth population in Texas. What are you going to do to protect and care for them?
To any transgender child, to any transgender adult, our simple message is you are in the right place. And we're so damn proud that you're a Texan. We're going to stand behind you. We are going to fight for you. We're going to make sure that we stop these attacks against you. And we're going to stop being defensive. Whether we're Democrats, Republicans, or Texans, we're going to stop getting on the back foot and make sure that we're on the front line. And what I mean by that is these other attacks on the LGBTQ community. For example, in Texas, though it's not okay, though it's not all right, it is perfectly legal to fire somebody because they're gay. And though it's not okay, it's not all right, it's also perfectly legal to deny somebody adoption of one of those kids in the foster care program because they are a same-sex couple. We're going to make sure that we end discrimination in this state on any basis, color, skin, national origin, gender, sexual orientation, any difference, no man protest. Thank you for being here.
Hi there, welcome to the island. My name is Deborah. First of all, I want to let everybody know that I am a block walk host.
Yes.
I host it too, and I would encourage each and every one of you to walk the streets for Robert, Francis, Beethoven, O'Rourke.
Yeah.
All right? Walk it. Now, my question is this. When you become governor, will you have a majority legislative branch to work with, meaning state senators and state congressmen? That's really important because if you don't have that, we're going to still have a long way to go.
I'll tell you what, it's going to be hard. We're just going to be clear-eyed about this. I think Janet Duddy has a great chance to be our next comptroller. I think that whether it's Rochelle Garza as Attorney General, Jay Clayburgh for Land Commissioner, Luke Warford for Railroad Commissioner, we've got an extraordinary slate of candidates at the statewide. The state house districts are a little tougher because they have been so effectively gerrymandered. The people in power choosing their voters instead of the other way around. Not impossible to overcome. And when we win, we're going to work on citizen-led redistricting commissions instead of partisan-led redistricting commissions. But even if we have a Republican majority, you know, I mentioned teacher pay a while ago. The lowest paid teachers in the state are represented by Republicans in the legislature. They're having the hardest time keeping those teachers on the rolls and keeping those classrooms staffed. When I talk about Medicaid expansion, there have been 16 hospitals in rural Republican represented Texas that have shut down on Greg Abbott's watch. Rural Republican-led Texas would benefit most from Medicaid expansion. It would do all of us a world of good, but nowhere more so than in those districts. We are going to use the power of public sentiment, the push of people who become politically involved, and we're going to appeal to the re-election prospects of those Republican representatives to do the right thing, whether it's on reproductive freedom and justice, whether it's on Medicaid expansion, whether it's on teacher pay, whether it's this toxic burn pit. So, Democrat or Republican, don't important. We will work with you anytime, any place, anywhere to get the job done. Thanks for asking the question. Thanks for hosting the Blackhawks. Thank you for making this happen.
All right, I'd like to recognize candidate for District Attorney Rachel Dragany.
Hey, Rachel.
Here's our next question.
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, I'm a liberal, so I believe in climate change. The question I've got to convince, I retired from the retirees over in Texas City. The problem we've got is mostly conservatives are voting against their own self-interest due to the fact they're going to lose their jobs. That's in their mentality. What are we going to do to make training and increase their awareness of environmental laws in Texas?
Great question. I think all of us in this room are proud of you and everyone who's worked in the energy industry in Texas. You have secured the energy independence of this country from the rest of the world. When I was growing up, we were still fighting wars in the Persian Gulf to secure our supply lines. We don't have to do that anymore. I just realized after Russia invaded Ukraine that we were importing 10% of our oil from that country. We don't have to do that anymore. We can get there right here in the state of Texas. I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for the jobs that come with that. But we know that the world is heading in only one direction. And the faster the better for our chance to avert a climate catastrophe. And that's renewable energy. The best thing that we can do, the gentleman says, what about those folks who say, I'm going to be replaced, my job's going to be taken from me, I won't have a future in this state. Well, the working women and the working men of Texas under the AFL-CIO came up with a Texas jobs plan that creates more than 1 million new high-skilled, high-wage, high-value jobs in wind, in solar, in hydrogen, in geothermal, in battery storage, in energy efficiency, so that we can keep places cooler in the summer by using less electricity and not pushing the climate as hard as we are today. Imagine holding this meeting in this room 10 years from now, not sweating through our shirts. That would be awesome. We can do that right here in Texas. It's going to happen. It's going to be led somewhere in the world. And I'd rather it be led right here in Texas and by the very men and women who have produced the innovation and the ingenuity for our energy leadership that we've dominated for the last 50 years. I want to make sure we have it for the next 100. So every person working in it now has a seat at the table in our Texas. Thanks for asking the question. Appreciate it.
Time for 4 more questions.
There's so much I want to say, but I'm going to keep it really short. I work upstairs, up here on the 5th floor for Child Protective Services. I've worked for CPS for 18 years. You're as horrified as you are about being forced to save in hotel rooms a mandatory 50 extra hours a month to babysit kids because they've been told they don't have to go to a foster home. But on top of that, we have administrative workers who have not had a cost of living increase in 10 years. And as a CPS worker, we have not had a cost of living or raise or anything in more than 7 years. We are dying to do our jobs. We want to do our jobs. We care about our kids, but we're losing or hemorrhaging people because of the working conditions. What can we do to find foster homes for kids and to help CPS deal with these children without being dragged down by Greg Abbott's rules?
Great question. I join everyone in here in my gratitude to you for staying in a job that's really tough. We know a lot of your colleagues have left because of everything you just described, the lack of cost of living adjustment, the low pay, the pressure, the underinvestment in the system. Judge Jack is a federal judge that's been on this issue. 6 years ago, she described CPS as a system where kids emerge more damaged than when they first went in. This last January, she said that problem she first described 6 years ago has gone from bad to worse. Not because of the caseworkers. They're laboring under extraordinary pressure, extraordinary odds, without really any funding, resources, or attention from the governor. It's on one guy, right? The buck stops in that office. The question is, how are we going to turn this around? In addition to making sure that you too are treated with that respect and dignity that you earned and that we owe you. And that we pay you enough to keep you on the job and make sure that at least financially you are doing okay. We've got to make sure that we do a better job of improving that system wholesale. Here's what I've heard from other caseworkers like you, foster parents, and kids who graduated from the foster care system. One, no parent wants to lose their child to the foster care system. Some parents are put in such a predicament that they have almost no choice. Think about this. In a state where the minimum wage is still $7.25 an hour, how many parents are working not one, but 2 or 3 jobs to make ends meet? In the least insured state in the nation, where the largest provider of mental health care services is the county jail, how many untreated schizophrenic, bipolar, clinically depressed people do we have out there who are struggling to get the health care they need as well as raise their kids? In a state that doesn't have all-day universal pre-K, how many parents are at home with their kid right now instead of being able to finish their education, earn a paycheck, and if they can't earn a paycheck, how do they stay in the house, meet the mortgage bills, pay their rent? They're on their streets, their kids, they take it away from them. So what if we move the minimum wage to $15 an hour, expanded welfare, investing in mental health care services, cut the back of these CPS caseworkers, hire more of them? We finally be giving the most vulnerable among us in this state a chance to succeed. And that's all they want. No one wants a handout. No one's asking for anything for free. They just want a chance, and we can do that. Thank you for what you're doing and for elevating these kids to the front.
Hi, Dada. I came to campaign for you for Senate in 2018, so I'm so excited you're running for governor. I want to just bring this back to abortion one more time, because Texas and abortion, I just wanted to uplift. I am the face of abortion, 1 in 4 women. I had to terminate a pregnancy that I very, very much wanted at 17 weeks, and that was because of medical reasons. And I just wanted everyone to remember my story, because I didn't find out that my baby had fetal anomalies until I can get an amniocentesis at 16 weeks. And I feel like no one ever talks about this. And so I want you to remember women like me. And I mean, women like me who are terminating after 12 weeks, it's like 1 to 4%. So it's not like it's happening all the time. But people like me need to have this option to be able to terminate a pregnancy if the baby is not going to survive or it's going to affect my life. And so I just want you to remember my story. And I guess my question is 2 ways that people in Texas can most effectively help you, and also how can people outside of Texas help you?
Great, thank you for these questions. Awesome. You are like so many courageous women in this state who have publicly shared extraordinarily personal stories with me and with everybody who's listening and watching to no benefit to you. It does not help you, but it's going to help others in the state. Know that they're not alone. Know that there's someone who's with them. And for that generation that I keep talking about that's coming up right now, whose eyes are on us, wondering what we are going to do given what is happening. You're trying to make sure that you push us all in the right direction. We've got this extraordinary capacity as human beings for empathy. Abortion may be just a word. Maternal mortality rate may sound so goddamn academic. But if I hear about somebody who may have already thought about the name that she was going to give that child, who had a pregnancy that they planned and was racked with pain when they had to give up that pregnancy, I'm suddenly brought in, and it's you, it's a human being, it's somebody I care about. And time again, for as many abortions as have taken place in Texas, there are that many stories of the decisions that people have made. They are so personal. They are so private. They are often so painful that I believe the only person who can be trusted to make them is the very person at stake, and that is the mother and the sister, the women and the sisters. So, we're grateful to you for your courage. It's going to provide power to others who need it at this moment. You asked, what are the two things that we can do to make sure that we win? Because again, we're not going to count on the Supreme Court, right? We know which direction they're going. Next is contraception. After that is same-sex intimacy. They're going to revive the sodomy laws in the state of Texas. Following that is the end of marriage equality. You think I'm making it up? Read Justice Clarence Thomas's consenting opinion to the Dobbs decision. Guess which state, if we don't win this, is going to take the lead in stripping every remaining right that you thought we had already won and the game was over. So, what are we going to do? I got to tell you, not to repeat myself, but it bears repeating. You got to sign up and you got to knock on doors. It's the only thing that is going to do this. You see me in an ad, if you even catch the ad, well shit, that's a politician saying what politicians say. Somebody from your neighborhood who looks like you, talks like you, has the same experiences, graduated from the same high school, suddenly you are paying attention. You are a validator not for Beto, but for this cause, this movement, this moment. And those 7 million, number one reason given for not having cast a ballot in 2020 is that no one asked them to. Literally, no one asked them to. The chance that they will vote increases exponentially when you show up at their door. If you do not catch a clipboard before you leave, you can go to betofortexas.com and you can sign up there. The other thing that you can do is donate money to this campaign. Because as many volunteers as we have, 80,000 and counting, especially after tonight, we're not going to be able to be on every single door. There'll be, Nick will tell us 8 to 11 million people who will show up in this election. Some of them we're going to have to reach in other innovative ways that cost money. If I have those resources, I can reach more voters. Even the good that TV does, even if it's marginal, it will do something. I can get those ads up a little bit earlier the more that we raise. And as you all know, whatever policy differences may exist between us, what other questions you want to ask that I have yet to answer, the big one in your mind right now is, can this guy win? Can we win? When this people who didn't want to get their hopes up, who didn't want to have their hearts broken by Texas again, suddenly they're in the game. They begin to believe, and they begin to act on that belief. We in this room do not think that hope is a passive thing. Hope is not waiting for somebody else. Hope is taking action in matters into our own hands by knocking on doors and meeting voters. So, if you can knock on doors, please, if you can make phone calls, if you can write letters, and if you can do all that and also donate, please do that as well. Thanks for asking this question.
To your right, Beto.
When I was knocking on doors for him in Dallas, people were going wild. I got the most amazing reception. It was almost like 100%. Everybody was like, no! And they were so excited. People
All right, let's go to our next
so good luck.
Here we go. To your right, to your left. Here we go.
There we go. Future Governor O'Rourke. You've been all over the state of Texas ferociously campaigning. You and I have run into each other several times here in District 14. We've heard from constituents and voters that they want to hear from their elected officials, that they don't want debates. I've openly challenged Randy Weber to a debate and heard absolutely nothing. My question to you, have you seen Randy Weber?
Not since I served in Congress, but the way you're doing it, the way we're doing it, is the right way to do it. I saw Michael in Port Arthur, I saw Michael in Beaumont. I see him in the big cities, the big places, the obvious spots for a Democrat to be. I see him where no Democrat has tread foot in decades. And when Democrats don't show up, Republicans don't have to show up either. There's no contest in November, and the folks in those communities are functionally unrepresented and unserved. That's why we are everywhere, folks. We're on day 15 right now of a 49-day push throughout Texas. 49 days straight on the road. We're in Muleshoe and Hemp Hill and Woodville and Pittsburgh and Palestine and Texarkana and Longview. That was just the last 3 days of those 15 days. We're going everywhere for everyone. No one gets written off in our Texas. No one gets taken for granted in our Texas. It's all of us. It's you and me. Thank you, Michael.
Here's my last two questions.
Hi, Beto.
Hey there.
I'm like so nervous, but thank you so much for being here. I am a gay cisgender male, and I'm also a researcher. My research focuses on the well-being of LGBTQ people in the United States. According to the Williams Institute, Texas is home to the second largest LGBTQ population, and there are only 14% of protective laws in Texas that protect LGBT sexual people of different sexual orientation and gender identity. So my question to you, what will you do to protect my community and promote our well-being and advocate for LGBTQ Texans?
Yeah. I'm so glad that you're here. You're an example of what we need to do. We literally need to stand up and be counted for ourselves, for one another, for everybody right now. I mentioned at the outset, in Abbott's, Texas, the one that we have today, it's you or me. We're supposed to be afraid of you, so much so that they're introducing a Don't Say Gay bill this next legislative session. You know, maybe part of how we got here is a failure of imagination on our part. I could have never imagined that I would see hand trucks carting off books from school libraries across the state of Texas right now because characters in them happen to be gay or members of the LGBTQ community. That's exactly what is happening in school libraries in the state of Texas right now. I mentioned you can be fired or they can refuse to hire you based on your orientation. They can refuse you the ability to adopt. They're talking about criminalizing same-sex intimacy and ending marriage equality. Here's the big lesson for me, and I'm embarrassed to say it. You probably were there years before I ever arrived. I kind of thought progress was inevitable. And I thought victories were so hard fought and won were final. And they're not. Roe versus Wade, as cataclysmic, seismic, whatever the word either side wanted to use for it, we thought that was done. Half a century, it stood the test of time, and it just came down. Because those who were against it never stopped fighting. What I've learned when it comes to marriage equality and LGBTQ rights and expanding them in the state of Texas in the areas that you and I just discussed, not only must we win this election, and that's a necessary first step, by the way, but the fight will not end on election night, November 8th. In fact, the fight continues all the way through the first 4 years of that administration and on until we draw our last breath. These fights in a democracy, where the government is of, by, and for the people. The government is all of us. They're never over as long as you want this to be a democracy. Because I guarantee you, there will be someone on the other side of any issue that we care about, including the ones that you raised, who will be ceaseless in their determination, who will raise billions of dollars to fight for everything that you are and believe in and have fought to win. So we've got to be just as tenacious and committed on our side. You've got my commitment to be that for you as governor. I want you to be that with me.
So I'm here with my brother Josh, and I just want to speak for everybody and say we are so proud of Beto O'Rourke to become our next governor of Texas. You know, I know that the campaign trail is long and we don't know if we can do this and that, but I want to say from Galveston, we are so proud of you. So my question is this. I was watching Governor Abbott, a clip of him the other day, and he was going on about personal responsibility. And one of the reasons why we're all so fired up in this room today is because we understand that our children are about to go to school in a few weeks' time. And we have a governor sitting up in Austin who hasn't done a single thing to keep our kids safer after El Paso, didn't do a single thing to keep our kids safer after Uvalde, didn't do a single thing to keep our kids safer just a few miles down the road in Santa Fe. We're tired and we want action. And so as we're all going out and working to get you elected to become our next governor, we're seeing a lot of the voters who haven't voted before. One of them is my friend Desmond, who we brought today. It's one of the 7 million voters who have never voted before, has never engaged and been a part of the political process, didn't vote for the presidential election, and he's here today. So my question is, for voters like Desmond, what is your case to get Desmond fired up, get him to the polls to make you our next governor of the great state of Texas?
Desmond, I'm so glad that you're here, and you're standing next to 2 of my favorite Texans, probably my favorite president ever, President Warren, who's standing right next to you at the University of Houston. You know, we were talking about all of the challenges we face, and this darkness has descended on this beautiful state and these glorious people right now. The antidote to that, really the exciting thing about this moment, is that you and I can do something about it. And it's not going to happen through military force or violence or so many ways other people in other parts of the planet and over the course of world history have decided their differences. It's going to be you and I not only registering to vote and committing to voting in this election, which I hope you're going to do, and I know that I will, but going out and finding the others, the very people who've been targeted for suppression, who aren't supposed to participate, who've been counted out and forgotten if they were ever known to begin with, and to bring them into these solutions for everything that we care about. We heard about the climate earlier, in energy. We talked about gun violence. We talked about education, getting the backs of our veterans, saving our democracy. You name it, you find something that matters, you will decide the outcome in this election, and I'm counting on you. Let me say this in closing, Desmond, Martin Brothers, and everybody else. I was just asked a question about water. We have more water systems in this state where what comes out of the tap is unfit to drink than any other state, right? We were just up in Lufkin, Texas, and in Angelina County, there's a community whose water is worse than the water in Flint today. Your vote can not only elect a governor who can address this to ensure that we have the resources and the attention to these deeply underserved communities, but you can also elect a land commissioner, this guy Jay Clever that I've been talking about, who's going to make it his business to protect the water, the air, and the land. Governor over here, the council, all of these amazing candidates, you and I get to get this done. And the very last thing that I want to say, I don't know if Rhonda Hart is still with us, but she was sick today. Let me just say this. She's from Galveston. And you sometimes wonder, Desmond, like, does my vote matter? Does coming to something like this count for anything? If I talk to Beto, will it make a difference? You all may or may not know that Rhonda lost her daughter, Kimberly, in the Santa Fe High School shooting in 2018. Rhonda's an Army veteran. She was a school bus driver in that district where her daughter was killed. Met with me within days after that shooting so that I could hear her daughter's story, meet her other surviving child, and talk about what she and I were going to do together. She talked about this idea she calls safe storage. She's a gun owner. She's a proud defender of the Second Amendment. And she said, look, if you have kids in the house and you have a firearm, keep that thing secured. The young man, the boy who killed my daughter, was able to get his hands on his parents' shotgun that was unsecured in their home. and walking into school. Safe storage, it makes sense. Gun owners, non-gun owners, Republicans, Democrats, veterans like me, she said, we all get behind it. Well, that was 4 years ago. And she's been pushing and talking to people like me and members of Congress on both sides of the aisle. Her persistence, her tenacity, her courage, she just got a bill passed in the United States House of Representatives that will make safe storage the law of the land in the United States of America. Wanda Hunt, Galveston County, did that. So we have the power right now to make big things happen for one another, and we're going to do it. Galveston, thank you for coming out tonight. Thanks for being with us. Thank you for always supporting us. We're on the rest of it. Thank you.